Okay, so shall I start? Okay, okay.
একদম সবকিছু স্মুথ চলে তো হার্ডলি 1 থেকে 2 মিনিট লাগে।
Good evening, everyone. So today's topic is dividend decisions, subject financial management. So I think my screen is visible to all of you. So yeah, okay, thank you. So let us get straight into the topic. So we will start with what is dividend. Now, basically, the company earns a certain amount of profit, and after meeting its tax obligations, a certain portion is left, which is known as profit after tax, which you students commonly refer to as PAT. So that portion of the profit, which is distributed among the equity shareholders, is referred to as dividend. Now, what happens to that portion which is not distributed to the equity shareholders? That portion basically becomes your retained earnings. Retained earning is that part of the profit which is plowed back into the business for further investment purposes. So that means that implies that a certain part of the profit is distributed as dividend and the other part is retained into the business for its further investment purposes. Now, this dividend is an important guiding factor for shareholders while they are determining your share value. Whenever shareholders are concerned with your company, they are concerned with your share value, they will definitely find out the benefit which they will be extracting out of it. And the motivational factor behind each shareholder in investing in your company is basically dividend because that is what you are getting in return. That is how it is considered. So, naturally, consequently, an effective dividend policy is essential for the overall objective of the firm. And what is the overall objective of the firm? To maximize the wealth, to satisfy your shareholders, and to increase your reputation. Now, when you are acting as a financial manager of a company, the manager needs to take three important and major decisions. The first being investing decision, that is where to invest. You may have ample investment opportunities, but you may not find each opportunity suitable for your company or beneficial to your company. So you need to first choose an appropriate investment opportunity. So that decision is your investing decision. Now comes the second most important decision, that is your financing decision. That you will invest, that investment will fetch you benefit, you will need to finance such investment. Now the question is how to finance the investment, whether you will be using your debt financing, whether you will be using your equity capital, whatever you will be utilizing, what will fetch you the greatest amount of benefit will be decided by the financial manager through its financing decision. And the last and a very important decision which a financial manager needs to take is dividend decision. Why we call dividend decision? Because a decision needs to be taken by the financial manager regarding whether to distribute dividend, how much amount of dividend to be distributed, how much amount to be retained back, what will be the consequences if a majority portion of the profit is retained and a minimum amount is paid as dividend, or if a majority amount is of profit after tax is paid as dividend and a minority portion is retained as your plowed back profit into the business, what consequences will a manager have to face? That you need to understand. That is why we say that dividend decision is a very critical decision to take. Now, as I have already mentioned, that part of profit which is not distributed as dividend is plowed back into the business to finance further investment decisions. Because you will be needing capital, you will be needing finance to finance your investment decisions. So the company will always be in the search for ample sources of finance. Now, the profit which they are earning, if they are distributing the entire profit as dividend, they will not be left with anything to move forward. So that is why they need to retain a certain portion, and that portion is always invested into the business for the benefit of the business. Now, as soon as the company is paying dividend, what is happening is you have, or you all know regarding the financial statements, you have learned about cash flow, you have learned about fund flow. Now, whenever you are paying dividend, that portion which is paid is a cash flow for the company, cash outflow for the company to be very specific. But although being a cash outflow, it fetches the company goodwill and it also helps the company to earn the confidence of the investors. As an investor, when you will find out that this company is selling shares, I will be investing in the equity shares of this company, but there is no guarantee that I will get a dividend as a return at the end of the year. They might be paying, they will be showing you an expectation that you will be paid a larger amount of dividend after 3 years. But you may not be willing to take the risk of waiting down for 3 years to fetch your return. You may be interested in getting return as and when you are investing. So that is why, to earn the confidence of the investors, if you as a stakeholder of the company, you are seeing that yes, the company is giving a certain amount of dividend, if that dividend is well enough for you, only then you will go for investing in that company. So naturally, as a stakeholder, you will always have to find out whether the company is paying an adequate amount of dividend. So in order to win your faith, your confidence, the company will have to find out ways of providing you dividend. So although dividend is a cash flow, it actually benefits the company because it helps the company to earn goodwill, and as well as it also gains confidence of the investors. Now that decision which you have to then you can understand that you have to keep many things at a time at your head when you are deciding whether to pay a dividend or how much amount of the profit to be distributed as dividend. So that decision which is to be taken regarding what part of profit should be retained and how much should be distributed, that is what we call as dividend payout ratio. That is how much dividend is to be paid out. That ratio is your dividend payout ratio. Now there is a dividend puzzle over here. Why I say puzzle is your objective, or you as a firm, the objective of the firm is to maximize the value of these shares. In other words, to maximize your EPS, that is earnings per share. Now, as a financial manager, I know where to invest and I know how to finance such investment. That is why I have mentioned here that my known factor, that is something which I know, is where I will invest, which investment opportunities to avail, and how to finance those investments. So that is known to me. Now, where is my doubt? Where is the puzzle and which puzzle I need to solve? I need to first find out whether high dividend payment will increase my share price, or it will decrease my share price, or it will have no effect on the share price. So, what is the puzzle? I repeat myself. My objective is to maximize EPS so that I find confident investors who will invest in my company. So, my objective is to maximize my EPS. I know where to invest and how to finance such investments. What I don't know is if I pay a greater amount of dividend, that will be reflected through an increase in share price or a decrease in share price, or will my dividend payment not have any effect on the share price? There lies the puzzle, which the financial manager needs to solve in order to go through this maze of dividend distribution. Now, as we have a puzzle, to solve that puzzle, there are various models. Now, basically, the model is distributed or divided into two broad thoughts, two school of thoughts, two completely different perspective of thoughts. One school of thought says that if you are paying regular dividend, then shareholders will be attracted towards your company because they are rational and they believe in having something as and when required. So, one school of thought stresses on the fact that regular dividend will attract shareholders. Another school of thought says shareholders are indifferent to whatever dividend you are paying. Whether you are paying, whether you are not paying, shareholders are indifferent. So it seems a bit irrational, naturally, because if I don't get any benefit, why will I invest? Why will someone say that shareholders are indifferent to what amount of dividend is to be paid? That also has got a reason, that also has been justified by a particular model we will come into later. So basically now what we need to know is we have two school of thoughts. One says that yes, regular dividend attracts shareholders, indirectly trying to say that dividend policy affects shareholders, and the other school of thought says shareholders remain unaffected through whatever dividend policy the company is availing. Now, from the first school of thought, which says that dividend policy affects shareholders or regular dividend attracts shareholders, the first such model is Walter's model. Now, Walter's model, the founder of Walter's model is, the propounder's name is James Walter. He has proposed the model and he says that dividend policy affects market price. So dividend policy affects market price, that has been justified by Walter. Now each model, as you have learnt in economics, each model has got some assumptions. Under those assumptions, these model holds true. This is applicable for each model wheresoever in whatever subject you find. So the first assumption which Walter makes is all investments are financed through retained earnings. That means you do not have any other source of financing. Whatever profits are plowed back into the business, that is further utilized for your investment purposes, and that is your only source of finance. Next is rate of return, that is return on the investment which you are getting, rate of return which is represented through small r, and your cost of capital which is represented through small k. These are constant, that is neither your rate of return changes nor your cost of capital changes. Holding these two factors constant, we will be having the authenticity of this model. And a firm has got an infinite period of life. That means there is no closure of the firm. We have an infinite life of the firm. Now, so that means Walter's model is supporting the doctrine that dividends are relevant. Now, the investment policy of a firm cannot be separated from its dividend policy, and both are, according to Walter, interlinked. That means your investment decision and your dividend decision, according to Walter, is interlinked. So, the choice of an appropriate dividend policy shall affect the value of your firm. Now, the key argument in support of the relevance proposition of Walter model is that what he tries to say is that the relationship between the return on a firm's investment, that is what I have represented here as R, and its cost of capital, that is K, these two have a relationship. The firm would have an optimum dividend policy, which you can determine only through the relationship between R and K. According to Walter, there are three types of firms. One is a growth firm, one is a declining firm, and one is a normal firm. Now, how do I understand whether a firm is a growth firm, whether it is a declining firm, or whether it is a normal firm? In case of a growth firm, how to identify a firm as a growth firm? Say, for example, if your rate of return is greater than your cost of capital, think it normally, not in terms of finance. If you are getting something which is higher than what you are expending, obviously you are on a growth path. Your firm is accelerating, and that is why you are getting a return which is higher than what you have expended. So, here that is what is written. When R is greater than K, R represents return on investment, K represents cost of capital. Cost of capital meaning the cost through which you have financed the investment. That means I have financed the investment at 10% and I am getting a return of 12%. So naturally, my return is greater than my cost of capital. So when I am fetching a greater return than what I have invested, I am obviously in the good books. My trend is obviously uprising. So that is why we call that firm a growth firm. Now, if I am getting something less than what I have expended, the total aggregate cost of capital through which I have financed an investment, say for example, is 15%, whereas I am getting as return 12%. So I have invested at the rate of 15%, and if I am getting return at the rate of 12%, I am fetching less than what I have spent. So that means I have a diminishing or declining curve. So I am not in so good book. So that is why I am a declining firm. And when you are in a position where whatever you have spent, you have received back exactly the entire amount. So rate of return and your cost of capital is same, is equalized. That is when you are neither in the accelerating curve nor in your decelerating curve. So you are a normal firm. So you have spent 12%, you are earning 12%. So you are on in an equilibrium and you are a normal firm. Neither your curve is uprising nor your curve is downturn. So that is when you are called a normal firm. Now, according to Walter, whatever he has said, the crux of the matter is if you are a growth firm, the ideal payout ratio should be zero. I will explain this. For the timing, I'm explaining the flow chart now. If you are a growth firm, your payout ratio should ideally be zero. What do I mean by payout ratio should be zero? It implies that you will be in a better position if you are not distributing any amount as dividend. So you are earning a profit, you are showing your profit after tax, and the entire amount of your profit after tax is retained back into the business and nothing is being distributed as dividend. If you are a growth fund and if you are not distributing anything as dividend, then you will be able to maximize your EPS. If you are a declining firm, that is, if R is less than K, then your ideal payout ratio should be 100%. That means the entire portion of the profit after tax should have to be distributed as dividend so as to maximize your EPS. And in case of normal firm, your dividend policy will not affect the market price of the share. So whatever amount of dividend, whether zero, whether 100, anything between 0 and 100, if you are a normal firm, if your rate of return on investment and your cost of capital is equal, then your dividend policy, whatever you choose, is not going to affect your market price. And in case of a growth fund, your market price is inversely proportional to dividend payout ratio. That is very much reflected through your payout, ideal payout ratio zero. I say ideal payout ratio should be zero. That means your total amount of dividend payment should be zero. When you are paying total dividend zero, you are actually enhancing your EPS. So that implies a negative relationship. The higher the dividend policy or the higher the amount of dividend, the lower the amount of your market price. So that is why I say market price is inversely proportional to dividend policy. In case of declining firm, when I say that payout ratio, ideal payout ratio should be 100%, I mean to say that the entire amount of profit after tax should be distributed as dividend. If you are paying out the entire amount as dividend, you will be able to maximize your market price. So what does that mean? That market price and dividend policy is positively related. The greater the amount of dividend, the greater the market price of the share. Now let me explain why does Walter think so. That is why, according to Walter, if you are having a growth firm, that is, if your R is greater than K, why does Walter think that the ideal payout ratio should be zero? The rationale is that if R is greater than K, the firm is able to earn more than what the shareholders could by reinvesting if the earnings are paid to them. Now, if your R is already greater than K, that implies what? Your firm is in a position where it can already earn something more than you would have earned if you would have invested elsewhere. So that implies that you are earning a higher return by investing elsewhere. So Walter's model thus relates the distribution of dividend to available investment opportunities. When you are earning something more, that means your firm is having adequate profitable investment opportunity. So if your firm is already having adequate profitable investment opportunities, it will be able to earn more than what the investors expect, so that R will automatically become greater than K. Now, that is why I say that even if you do not pay any dividend, then also the shareholders will be attracted towards your firm, because they will be seeing, they will be observing that your firm has ample investment opportunities and you are earning a greater return than what you are spending. So that will be the motivational factor. You need not motivate them through your dividend payment, as your return is greater than the cost of capital, which will be reflected in your financial statements, and that will automatically motivate the shareholders. To motivate them, in this case, in case of a growth fund, you need not show them the amount of dividend you are paying. You just need to let them know that my return is greater than the cost of capital. That will automatically attract the shareholders. So even if you are paying zero dividend, if you are ideally paying zero dividend, that will make the shareholders understand that this firm is not paying dividend, this firm is retaining back the entire profit, and where once they are retaining back the entire profit, that amount of profit will further be utilized in investment decision, and when they will be investing, they will be earning a greater return, because that is the trend of the firm. So that is why you need not compensate them through dividend payment. But if your firm is a declining firm, that means your firm is already in the bad books of the shareholders, because the shareholder can see that you are not able to earn return greater than what you have spent. So your return is less than your cost of capital. If your return is already less than your cost of capital, you need to motivate shareholders to invest in your firm. Or else, how will your company or how will your firm grow? In order to make the shareholders attracted towards your firm, here you need to pay them full dividend. You have to show them that since I am not able to fetch anything extra, anything more than my cost of capital, that is why I am not retaining anything, but I am giving you the entire amount as dividend, so that you can invest it elsewhere and fetch a return beneficial to the company. So if you are a declining firm, since you are already, to be very simple, since you are a declining firm, you are already in the bad books of a shareholder. So you need to motivate them by paying dividend. So pay them the entire amount, attract them, let them enter your firm. The finance, the capital will increase, and automatically your declining firm will go up to your growth firm. But in case of a growth firm, you need not motivate them. And if it is a normal firm, in any case, the shareholders are indifferent towards payment of dividend or towards non-payment of dividend, because they are not at all interested in investing in your company, because they can see that your R and your K is in equilibrium. You are neither in a growth position nor in a declining position, so they will not be able to help you anyway. So that is why you're not, in case of a normal firm, Walter says that dividend shareholders are unaffected by dividend policy, and whatever you do, whatever amount of dividend you pay, the market price of the share will not be affected. So that's the logic. Now, to solve the sums, Walter has proposed a formula for calculating the market price per share, where he says that P is equal to D plus R by K into E minus D divided by K, where P represents your market price per share, D represents dividend per share, R represents rate of return on investment, K represents cost of capital, and E represents earning per share. So that is your Walters model. Next, another model which supports the fact that dividend policy is important to the shareholders and dividend policy affects their decisions is Myron Gordon's model. So the next model is Gordon's model. The founder of the Gordon's model is Myron Gordon. Now he is also of the view that dividend policy affects market price. The assumptions, besides the assumptions as assumed by Walter, that is, all investments are financed through retained earnings, rate of return and cost of capital are constant factors, and the firm has an infinite life. Besides these three, Gordon has got two extra assumptions. One is the last one, that is, the cost of capital should be greater than the growth rate of the firm. Now, here we are introduced to an extra variable, an extra unknown factor, which is G. G is the growth rate of the firm. That is, at what rate is the firm growing? How do we find out that? That is the product of retention ratio and its rate of return. Retention ratio is the opposite of dividend payout ratio. If your dividend payout ratio is 20%, that implies your retention ratio is 80%. Because if you consider the profit after tax as 100%, a part of the profit is distributed as dividend, a part is retained. So if you are retaining 80%, that means you are paying out 20%. If you are paying out 60%, that means you are retaining 40%. So your retention ratio and dividend payout ratio is just the opposite of each other. And retention ratio multiplied by rate of return. Retention ratio is represented by B. B into R, that is retention ratio multiplied by rate of return, will give you your growth rate. Now, cost of capital should have to be greater than the growth rate for Gordon's model to hold true. So these two are the extra assumptions by Gordon. Now, in support of Gordon's model, any confusion, any doubts, you may please ask me. If you have any doubts, if anyone is there, if anyone is hearing, if anyone has any doubts, you may please ask me here and now. Okay, so let me move into the topic again. So it can be seen from the assumptions of Gordon's model that they are similar to those of Walter's model, as I've already told you. As a result, Gordon's model, like Walter's model, is also contending the fact that dividend policy of the firm is relevant and that the investors put a positive premium on current income or dividend. Now, according to Gordon, all investors are rational investors. And since the investors are rational, they are of the view that a bird in the hand, you may have all heard this proverb, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. What does that imply? That if I am getting dividend now, it is better than having an expectation of earning a future dividend. So they are always interested in having dividend at the present moment, at the present time. So that is what Gordon says. Now, Gordon's model can be defined by the formula P is equal to E into 1 minus B divided by K minus BR. P is the market price per share, E is the earning per share, B is your retention ratio. 1 minus B represents, naturally, it will represent your dividend payout ratio. K is your cost of capital. B, as I have already said, is retention ratio, and B into R is your growth rate. If it is given separately, you have to calculate B into R. If the growth rate is already given to you, you can just simply put it in the formula. Okay, now moving down to the second school of thought, who says that the dividend policy and its decision is absolutely irrelevant for the firm's valuation. Shareholders, all your stakeholders, they are indifferent to your dividend policy. Whatever your dividend policy be, the shareholders are not interested and your market price or the firm's value is not affected. Now, investment decisions affect earnings of the firm and consequently the value of the firm. So, according to this school of thought, what affects the firm's value is the investment decision and not the dividend decision. So, as per Walter and Gordon, you cannot separate investment decision from dividend decision because those two are interlinked. As a result of which, they are of the view that dividend decisions affect your investment decisions and both decisions consequently affect the value of your firm. But the second school of thought is of the view that investment decisions are the is the only principal guiding factor for affecting your valuation of the firm. Dividend decisions has got nothing to do with it. And this second school of thought has been proposed by Modigliani Miller. Modigliani Miller is the propounder of this second school of thought who says that dividend policy is irrelevant. Now, the crux of the Modigliani Miller on the position on the irrelevance of dividend is the arbitrage argument. Now, what is arbitrage argument? They say Modigliani Miller is of the view that whenever you are paying a certain amount of dividend to the shareholders, the firm is raising an equal amount through external financing, either by issuing shares or by issuing debentures, whatever they will be issuing, and they will be issuing fresh capital and they will be fetching the exact amount as distributed as dividend. So that means what they are trying to do is they are trying to nullify the effect, nullify the benefit of the shareholders in the form of dividend by the increase in the market price. So those two are being nullified. That your cash is being outflown through dividend, that similar amount of cash is shown as an inflow by external source of capital by raising either shares or debentures. So basically, you are nullifying the effect. That is why we call Modigliani Miller's model as an arbitrage model, who proposes that whatever amount you are showing as outflow should also reflect as an inflow then and there. He assumes that investors are rational. There is no taxation system. There is no transaction cost, which you can find out that is very absurd. That does not hold true. Whatever we have to learn the model besides the assumptions, the model shows that given the investment opportunities, the firm shall finance such decision either by plowing back the profits, or if it pays dividend, then shall raise an equal amount of new share capital externally by selling new shares. That's what I have just now mentioned. So the firm has got several investment opportunities and those investment opportunities have to be financed. Now, Modigliani Miller or MM says that either you have to finance that by retaining the entire amount of profit, or if you are paying dividend, then you need to suffice that or substitute that amount which you are paying as dividend by raising an equal amount of new share capital externally. So the amount of dividend paid to the existing shareholders shall be replaced by new share capital raised. So you are seeing that the effect is being nullified. You are paying the amount of dividend to the existing shareholders, and on the other hand, you are creating new share capital. That means you are creating basically new shareholders. So the benefit of increased market value due to dividend payment will be offset by decrease in terminal value of the share. Finally, when you will be calculating the value of the share, the terminal value of the share will again be decreased by an exact equal amount by which the market value of the share has increased due to dividend payment. That you are paying dividend, that will create a goodwill, that will create a confidence in the minds of the shareholders, and that will automatically increase your market value. But on the other hand, you are raising your share capital by externally selling new shares, so you're creating new shareholders, so the total number of shareholders will increase, and automatically your terminal value of the share will decrease. So the decrease and the increase will be by the same amount, so that will be offset. Thus, shareholders will be indifferent between dividend payment or retaining of the profit. So the shareholders will find out that even if I get the dividend, ultimately the value of the share is being reduced. So if I do not get dividend, that also will result into the same thing. So that is better. Either I do not get any dividend, or even if I get the dividend, the share price will go down. So better I do not get dividend. So that is why Modigliani Miller says that dividend decision do not affect the shareholders, because the underlying fact is the arbitrage process. Now, in case of Modigliani Miller, we have got several formulas. Why? Because we have to find out, or we have to justify that even after payment of dividend, the market price remains the same. This model will get more clear when we do a sum. First, let me explain the formula. The first thing which is stated here is market price of a share at the beginning of the period. So when you are starting, when you are in the at the 0th time of a period, the market price of the share is represented as P0 is equal to D1 plus P1 divided by 1 plus K. P0 is your market price per share at the beginning of the period. P1 is market price per share at the end of the period. D1 is dividend per share at the end of the period, and K is your cost of capital. So this is your first formula. Next, if the company has n number of shares and there is no external financing, then your value of the firm is represented by n, that is number of shares, multiplied by market price per share. Now, P0 is defined as ND1 plus NP1 divided by N into 1 plus K. Similar, this formula multiplied by N because of having N number of shares. So, the same formula D1 plus P1 divided by 1 plus K will be multiplied by N to know the value of the firm. This is your market price of the firm multiplied by number of shares will give you total value of the firm. So, that is what is represented here. So V is equal to N into P0. So automatically N into D1 plus N into P1 divided by N into 1 plus K. N is your number of shares. Now, if the company plans to issue M number of equity shares, now they are externally raising another source of capital and thereby raising their equity shareholder. Now, MP1 is equal to I minus E minus ND1. M is your number of new shares issued. P1 is the market price per share at the end of the period. D1 is your dividend per share at the end of the period. I is total new investment by the firm. E is your earnings of the firm, and N is your number of shares. And ultimately, the value of the firm after issuing new share will be represented by the formula V is equal to N plus M into P1 minus I plus E divided by 1 plus K. This model will only get clear once you do a problem. Otherwise, you will not understand this model. Basically, you will have to undergo this model through these formulas that you have to know first. Now that I have explained the concept of dividend policy, I will move down to the problems. If anyone is here listening to this, if you have any doubts, you may please ask me now, or else I will straight away move to the problems. Okay, so first we have got some model sums to justify whatever Walter, Gordon, and Modigliani Miller has mentioned. So my first model sum is of a growth firm using Walter's model. How do I identify it as a growth firm? As I have said, if R is greater than K, the firm is a growth firm. So R is 40%, K is 30%, earning per share, that is E, is rupees 8. I have got two dividend policies. One says that the dividend is rupees 8 and the other says the dividend is rupees 4. If you place it in the formula, when the dividend is rupees 8, you get 26.67 rupees as your price per share or market price of the share. And when the dividend is rupees 4, you get rupees 31.11 as the answer. So what I try to prove here is I had already told you while I was clearing the concept of the growth form according to Walter model. Walter says that if R is greater than K, a form is referred to as a growth form. And in case of a growth form, the dividend policy and the market price per share is inversely proportional. That is, the relationship is negative. The higher the dividend, the lower the market price. See, in case here that when the dividend is rupees 8, you get price per share as 26.67. Whereas if you are lowering your dividend policy and you are giving rupees 4 as dividend, your market price is raised to rupees 31.11. So that is why Walter says that in case of a growth farm, your ideal dividend payout ratio should be 0. If you put D as 0 and solve the sum by yourself, you will find out that you will have a higher market price. In case of a declining firm, when R is less than K, R here is 20%, K is 30%, R is less than K, the same amount of dividend, 8 and 4. Once you are paying dividend as rupees 8, you will be getting P as 26.67. Whereas if you are paying rupees 4 as dividend, your market price goes further down to rupees 22.22. So that justifies the fact that Walter had already said that in case of a declining firm, your dividend policy and market price is directly proportional or positively related. Higher the dividend, higher the market price, lower the dividend, lower the market price. So that is what is reflected through this sum. That is why the ideal payout ratio for a declining firm is 100%. If you put rupees 100 as your dividend here and you calculate it, you will get a answer where your market price will be the highest. In case of a normal firm, R and K are equal, as you can see, R 30%, K 30%. Dividend rupees 8, you will find out P as 26.67. Even if your dividend is rupees 4, your market price remains the same, 26.67. So that again justifies Walter, who had already mentioned that whatever amount of dividend you are paying, if R is equal to K and if your firm is a normal firm, the shareholders will remain unaffected because the price or the market price per share will remain unaffected. Next, moving down to a model sum of Gordon. A growth farm, K is 30%, R is 40%, earning is rupees 8. Here we have considered B as 25%. B 25% implies retention ratio is 25%. That means you are paying out 75% as dividend, and in the next case, you are paying out 50% as dividend. You are putting it in the formula E into 1 minus B by K minus BR, and what you get is P as rupees 30 when your dividend payout ratio is 75% and P as 40 when your dividend payout ratio is 50%. So that means you can see that the dividend policy and the market price are positively related. Higher the dividend payout ratio, sorry, negatively related, here also the same thing. Higher the dividend payout ratio, lower the market price. Lower the dividend payout ratio, higher the market price. Same goes for a declining firm. Here you will find a positive relationship. When retention ratio is 25%, that means your dividend payout ratio is 75%, your market price is 24. Dividend payout ratio is 50%, your market price is rupees 20. That implies higher the dividend payout ratio, greater the market price, lower the dividend payout ratio, lower the market price. And in case of a normal fund, whatever be your retention ratio and the dividend payout ratio, in both the cases, your market price is the same at rupees 26.67. So Walter and Gordon have justified themselves when they say that in case of a growth fund, the dividend policy and the market price per share are inversely related, and thus for a growth fund, the ideal dividend payout ratio should be zero and the retained earnings should be 100%. In case of a declining fund, both Walter and Gordon have suggested that the ideal dividend payout ratio should be 100% because in case of a declining fund, the dividend payout ratio and market price are positively related. In case of a normal fund, the shareholders or the market price will remain indifferent to whatever retention and dividend payout ratio the company decides. Now, moving down to justifying the Modigliani-Miller model. Now, see the example. Omega Company has a cost of equity capital of 10%. The current market value of the fund, that is V, is rupees 20 lakh at the rate of rupees 20 per share. Assume values for I, Y, and D at the end of the year, as I is equal to rupees 6 lakh 80,000, that is total investment of the fund. Earnings of the fund Y is equal to rupees 1 lakh 50,000, and D, that is dividend, is rupees 1 per share. Show that under the assumption, the payment of dividend does not affect the value of the fund. We will calculate the value of the fund under two situations: when dividends are declared, when dividends are not declared, because we want to find out the justification behind model, where has said that whether you distribute dividend or you do not distribute dividend, the value of the firm will remain unchanged. So we need to see both the situations. Now, first we will compute the value of the fund when dividends are declared. Now the formula P0 is equal to D1 plus P1 by 1 plus K. P0 is rupees 20 given. K is 10%. Dividend is rupees 1, that is also given. We don't know P1, that is price at the end of the period. We will put it in the formula and you will have P1 as 21. Now, number of new shares issued, we don't know the number of new shares issued. So M, we will use that formula where we will be finding out M through this formula missing figure. M into P1 is equal to I minus Y minus ND1. Now M is missing. P1 is 21. We have just now calculated. I, which is investment given as rupees 6,80,000. Y is the earnings. You may represent Y as E as well. 1,50,000 minus N into D1. N is the existing number of shares which you will find out from the from the given information here. See, 20 lakh divided by 20. 20 lakh is the total value of the fund. 20 rupees is per share value. So the total number of share will be 20 lakh by 20, which will give you this amount, 1 lakh rupees. So 1,50,000 minus 1 lakh, and finally M will be calculated as a missing figure, 30,000. So 30,000 new shares have been issued. Now you have to find out the value of the fund after issuing this new shares. Because you are declaring dividend, that means you are automatically issuing new shares. So that is why you have used this formula to find out what is the number of new shares issued. Now putting that into the formula for calculating value of the fund, N plus M into P1 minus I plus E or Y divided by 1 plus K, you will find the value of the fund to be rupees 20 lakhs. Now we have to see that even if the fund had not declared dividend, then what would have been the situation? Here, what changes is your D1, that you had considered rupee 1 there, you will consider 0 here. So you have not declared any dividend, so D1 will be 0. Accordingly, P1 will come out to 22. Now you will find out the number of new shares issued and you will calculate V, which will give you rupees 20 lakh as an answer. So you are fitting it into the model and you are finding out that whether you pay dividend or you do not pay dividend, the value of the firm remains at rupees 20 lakh. So that means it is proved that Modigliani Miller is correct in his justification. Now moving down to some certain examples, some certain sums. following are the details regarding three companies: A Limited, B Limited, and C Limited. A Limited, for A Limited, your R is 15%, K is 10%. That means it is a growth farm, and E, earnings per share, is rupees 8. B Limited C, this is a declining farm, R is 5%, K is 10%, and E is rupees 8. C Limited is a normal farm, R is equal to K, and E is equal to rupees 8. So E is same for all the farms, R and K varies, and your dividend payout ratio varies: 25%, 50%, 75%. You have three cases, 3 into 3 are basically 9 cases. For 25%, you have to calculate for A, B, and C. Putting D as 50% or 0.50, you have to calculate for A, B, and C. For 75%, putting 0.75 as your D, you have to calculate for A, B, and C. You will find out that your justification was correct, and you will find out what I had justified through the model sum. These are principal sums, so there is no difference. Let us move down to the next sum. The earnings per share of the face value of rupees 100 of PQR Limited is rupees 20. It has a rate of return of 25%. Capitalization rate of its risk class is 12.5%. If Walter's model is used, what should be the optimum payout ratio? That is your first question. As soon as this question is asked, you have to go and check what is R, what is K. Now, R here is 25% and K here is 12.5%. So, R is greater than K. That will give you an answer that this firm, that PQR Limited, is a growth firm. Since it is a growth firm, Walter had said that for a growth firm, the ideal dividend payout ratio should be 0. See, that is what is written here. Optimum payout ratio is 0 for PQR Limited. Now they say what should be the market price per share if the payout ratio is 0. So in the formula, D into R plus R by K into E minus D divided by K, what you have to find, what you have to put: D as 0, R is given, K is given, E is given, and D is 0. Now you calculate P, you will find out an answer. The answer comes to rupees 320. Now, the third question says, suppose the company has a payout ratio of 25% of EPS, what would be the market price per share? 25% of EPS, as in EPS is rupees 20. 25% of EPS implies rupees 5. 25% of 20 is rupees 5. That means your dividend D is rupees 5. Put D as 5 in the formula and you will get a market price of rupees 280, which again justifies the fact that if it would have been 0, the market price per share of the firm would have been higher. Next sum, the earnings per share of ABC Limited is rupees 10 and rate of capitalization applicable to it is 10%. The company has before it the options of adopting a payout of 20% or 40% or 80%. That means the firm has three cases: payout ratio of 20%, payout ratio of 40%, payout ratio of 80%. These percentages are calculated on EPS. The EPS is rupees 10. So that means one case will be 20% of rupees 10, that is rupees 2 as dividend, 40% of rupees 10, that means rupees 4 as dividend, 80% of rupees 10, that means rupees 8 as dividend. Using Walter's formula, compute the market value of the company's share if the productivity of retained earnings is 20%, 10%, and 8%. Now you have to understand that what do you mean by productivity of retained earnings. To understand it in a very simple language, retained earning is something which you are retaining back in the business. Why are you retaining it? You are retaining it to further invest it in another investment. Now, the productivity of such investment, what does that mean? The return on that investment. So, productivity of retained earning is nothing but R, that is your return on investment. You have three R's here, three situations here. In the first case, your R is 20%. The second case, your R is 10%. And the third case, your R is 8%. Cost of capital is 10% in all the situations. You have three dividend payout ratio and three R's. So for each R, for each dividend payout ratio, you have to calculate the price per share. Okay. Now moving down to the next sum. Determine the market value of equity shares of the company from the following information. Earnings of the company is rupees 5 lakh. Dividend paid is rupees 3 lakh. Number of shares outstanding is rupees 1 lakh. Price earning ratio is rupees 8. Rate of return on investment, that is R, is 15%. They have asked you, are you satisfied with the current dividend policy of the firm? If not, what should be the optimal dividend payout ratio? Use Walter's model. So whether you are satisfied with the current dividend policy, you can only say that once you know what is the dividend payout ratio. Now for that you have to calculate dividend payout ratio. How do you calculate? You have a formula, you have a clue here. The price earning ratio is 8. Now, price earning ratio is defined by the formula market price divided by earnings per share. Now, the market price of the share is not given to you, but you have the earnings per share given. How do you have the earnings per share given? The earnings of the company is rupees 5 lakh. Number of shares is rupees 1 lakh. So 5 lakh divided by 1 lakh, 5 rupees is your EPS. So price earning ratio is 8, which is equal to market price by EPS. Market price is the missing figure. You get to know the market price, which is rupees 40. Now, if you have EPS as rupees 5, you know the dividend, which is rupees 3 lakh, right? Now, the dividend per share will be 3 lakh by 1 lakh, which is rupees 3, which is known as dividend per share, DPS. That is 3. Now, you will find out the dividend payout ratio using EPS and DPS. What is the formula for dividend payout ratio? DPS by EPS into 100. That is amount of dividend out of the earnings multiplied by 100. DPS is 3 out of 5 rupees as EPS multiplied by 100 gives you dividend payout ratio of 60%. Now you can see here your rate of return on investment is 15%, right? But you have to first know whether you are satisfied with the current dividend policy. That you will know after you know whether the firm is a growth firm or a declining firm. Now to know that you need both R and K, but here you do not have the K, you have the R given in your sum. How to know the K? Now, price earning ratio and your cost of capital is reciprocal of each other. That is, if price earning ratio is 8, your cost of capital will be 1 by 8. Similarly, if your cost of capital is 1 by 8, price earning ratio will be reciprocal of 1 by 8, which is 8. So here we have PE ratio given as 8. So your cost of capital K will be reciprocal of PE ratio, that is 1 by 8, which is equal to 0.125. That means 12.5%. So R is 15%, K is 12.5%, which implies it is a growth firm. So now dividend payout ratio is 60%. So we are not satisfied with the dividend payout ratio because in case of a growth firm, the ideal dividend payout ratio should be 0. So what should be the optimal dividend payout ratio? It should be 0. And now putting 0 in the formula, you calculate the P, you will get rupees 48. So it was 40 rupees, the market price was rupees 40. If the dividend payout ratio is 60%, so since we are not satisfied, we suggest that it should be 100% and it should be 0% and we justify our cause that if we put 0 as dividend, my market price is raised to rupees 48. Moving on to the next sum, the earnings per share of a company is rupees 10. It has an internal rate of return of 15%. Capitalization rate of its risk class is 12.5%. Almost similar sum, so I'm not dwelling into the detail. They have asked you what is the optimum payout ratio. You have to find out whether it is a growth or a declining firm, which is very much clear. R is 15, K is 12.5. It is a growth firm. So your optimum dividend payout ratio will be 0. This is almost a similar sum. I'm not going into the details. Next, let us move into the next sum. ABC and Company has been following a dividend policy which can maximize the market value of the firm as per Walter's model. Accordingly, each year at dividend time, the capital budget is reviewed in conjunction with the earnings for the period and alternative investment opportunities for the shareholders. In the current year, the firm expects earnings of rupees 5 lakh. It is estimated that the firm can earn rupees 1 lakh if the profits are retained. The investors have alternative investment opportunities that will yield them 10% return. The firm has 50,000 shares outstanding. What should be the dividend payout ratio in order to maximize the wealth of the shareholders? Also find out the current market price of the share. Now the firm's expectation is to earn an income of rupees 1 lakh on the investment of the current year, that is rupees 5 lakh. So that means they are expecting a rate of return of 1 lakh divided by 5 lakh, which is 20%. Whereas if the investor would have taken the alternative investment opportunity, they would have earned a return of 10%. That means the opportunity cost is 10%. It means that the rate of return of the firm, which is 20%, is more than the opportunity cost. That means it's more than 10%. So since 20% is greater than 10%, that means it is a growth fund. So again, my dividend payout ratio would have been zero. If it would have been zero, I would have been able to maximize the wealth of my shareholder. So put D as zero in your formula and calculate the market price. As simple as that. Next, moving down to the next sum. From the following information supplied to you, wait, let me move up the page. From the following information supplied to you, ascertain whether the firm is following an optimal dividend policy as per Walter's model. So more or less, this is again the same sum. I'm not going into the details. See the next, that is Gordon's model. A company has total investment of rupees 5 lakh, assets and 550,000 outstanding equity shares of rupees 10 each. It earns a rate of 15% on its investment and has a policy of retaining 50% of the earnings. If the appropriate discount rate for the firm is 10%, determine the price of its share using Gordon's model. What will happen to the price if the company has a payout of 80% or 20%? Now, according to Gordon's model, your formula is P is equal to E into 1 minus B by K minus BR. Now, your retention ratio is, you have three options. One is 0.50, another is 0.80, another is 0.20. Your discount rate that they have said, the discount rate that implies your cost of capital. The discount rate for the firm is 10%, means cost of capital K is 10%, which is 0.10. The rate of return is 15%, 0.15. Put them in the formula, you will get the answer. Next sum. Assuming that the rate of return expected by investor is 11%, internal rate of return is 12%, and earnings per share is rupees 15. Calculate price per share by Gordon approach method if dividend payout ratio is 10% and 30%. So in the given case, what you find out is K is 11%, R is 12% given. Earnings per share E is rupees 15. So you have everything. You have two dividend payout ratio, 10% and 30%. That means in the first case, your retention ratio B is 90%, and in the second case, your B is 70%. Put them in the formula, you will get the answer. Next, coming down to Modigliani-Miller model sum. The 10th problem. Wait. 15.10, that's the question. The RST Limited has a capital of rupees 10 lakh in equity shares of rupees 100 each. The shares are currently quoted at par, that means at rupees 100. The company proposes to declare a dividend of rupees 10 per share at the end of the current financial year. The capitalization rate for the risk class to which the company belongs is 12%. What will be the market price of the share at the end of the year if a dividend is not declared, a dividend is declared, and the third says assuming that the company pays the dividend and has net profits of rupees 5 lakh and makes new investment of rupees 10 lakh during the period, how many new shares must be issued? Use the model. So first to answer, if the dividend is not declared, now P0 is given to you 100 rupees is equal to, you use the formula 1 by 1 plus K into D1 plus P1. Now D1 is 0, dividend is not declared, you calculate, your P1 comes to be rupees 112. See here, the P1 comes out to be 112. Now if your dividend is declared, Now 100 is your P0. D1 will be replaced by rupees 10 because you are declaring a dividend. Now declaring a dividend, that if you are declaring dividend, you are declaring rupees 10 as dividend. That is the amount of proposed dividend. So you put D1 as 10 and you calculate P1, you get rupees 102. The third question says that if you are paying dividend, the company having a net profit of 5 lakh and you are making new investment of rupees 10 lakh. That means you have to use the formula of calculating M as I had showed you. M into P1 is equal to I minus N into D1. That formula you have to use and calculate the missing figure of M. Here they have shown it in a different format. If you use that formula, it will be much more easier to you. They have shown it in a statement form. They say that the total earning is rupees 5 lakh. You have paid a dividend of rupees 1 lakh. So that means you are retaining rupees 4 lakh. The total fund required for your investment is rupees 10 lakh. You already have 4 lakh from your retained earning to finance 10 lakh. So you need extra rupees 6 lakh. So fresh funds you have to raise rupees 6 lakh. Now, market price for the share, if the dividend is declared, you have calculated P1 as 102. You need rupees 6 lakh. The market price per share is 102. So the number of shares to be issued will be 6 lakh divided by 102. This is a way of solving the sum, or else you can use that formula and you can find out M as the missing figure. Okay, so the last sum for the day. Textro Limited has 80,000 shares outstanding. The current market price of these shares is rupees 15 each. The company expects a net profit of rupees 2,40,000 during the year, and it belongs to a risk class for which the appropriate capitalization rate has been estimated to be 20%. The company is considering dividend of rupees 2 per share for the current year. What will be the price of the share at the end of the year if the dividend is paid and if the dividend is not paid? How many new shares must the company issue if the dividend is paid and the company needs rupees 5,60,000 for an approved investment expenditure during the year? Almost a similar sum as the previous one. As per model, the current market price of the share will be P0 is equal to D1 plus P1 divided by 1 plus K. You are considering dividend as rupees 2. You calculate P1, it comes out to be rupees 60. If dividend is not paid, the price comes to be rupees 80. Now, number of new shares M is to be issued. See that this sum, they have shown it through the formula. You can also, in this case also, you can also use the statement format as they had used. You have to find out the total earnings. From that, you have to subtract the dividend paid. You will get the retained earning. You know what amount to be invested. Out of the retained earning, if that much is financed, what is the remaining portion? You will find out that to be rupees 4,80,000. Now you have to divide it by rupees 16 because when the dividend is declared, the price per share is rupees 16. So you have to consider P as rupees 16. If you divide it by that, you will get 30,000 new shares to be issued. Or else you can use this formula M into P1. M is the missing figure that you have to calculate the number of new shares to be issued multiplied by P1, that is rupees 16. Don't consider it as 18 because you are issuing new shares when you are paying dividend. So when you are paying dividend, your P1 is 16. You put P1 as 16. Investment is rupees 5,60,000. Earnings is 2,40,000. N is your existing number of shares. D1 is the proposed amount of dividend per share. You calculate M, you find out 30,000 as your new shares. That's it with the sums. Walter and Gordon will have the same formulas. Modigliani Miller, if you understand the question, the sum is easy to calculate because all the figures are almost given and you just need to put them appropriately in the formula and calculate them. So I hope it is clear. If you have any problems, you can please ask me, or else I am done for the day. The topic is over from my side. Ronak, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I don't think they have any questions because I cannot see anyone here present. So let's end our discussion session here.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Thank you for your nice presentations and your valuable time.
থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ, থ্যাংক ইউ ফর দ্য,
স্টুডেন্টসদের জন্য এটা ইউটিউবে রইলো। ওরা
হ্যাঁ,
ফার্দার আফটার বিফোর এক্সাম যখন প্রবলেম হবে ওরা দেখে নিতে পারবে।
দেখে নিতে পারবে, হ্যাঁ।
সো থ্যাংক ইউ ম্যাম, থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ। ওকে,
থ্যাংক ইউ সো
ওকে ম্যাম।